is, foot washers think women are a sin by definition. They take the Bible literally, you know. Is that why Mr. Arthur stays in the house, to keep away from women? I have no idea. It doesn't make sense to me. Looks like if Mr. Arthur was hankering after heaven, he'd come out on the porch at least. Atticus says God's loving folks like you love yourself. Miss Maudie stopped rocking and her voice hardened. You are too young to understand it, she said. But sometimes the Bible in the hand of one man is worse than a whiskey bottle in the hand of your father. I was shocked. Atticus doesn't drink whiskey, I said. He never drank a drop in his life. No, yes he did. He said he drank some one time and didn't like it. Miss Maudie laughed. Wasn't talking about your father, she said.
Oh, DoorDash for Sheila.
I got you. Who should be the last window? Who got that? Wait.
I meant was, if Atticus Finch drank until he was drunk, he wouldn't be as hard as some men are at their best. There are just some kind of men who are so busy worrying about the next world they've never learned.
M.
One, and you can look down the street and see the results. Do you think they're true? All those things they say about Mr. Arthur? What things? I told her. That is 3/4 colored folks and 1/4 Stephanie Crawford, said Miss Maudie grimly. Stephanie Crawford even told me once she woke up in the middle of the night and found him looking in the window at her. I said, "What did you do, Stephanie? Move over in the bed and make room for him." That shut her up a while. I was sure it did. Miss Maudie's voice was enough to shut anybody up. "No, child," she said. "That is a sad house. I remember Arthur Radley when he was a boy. He always spoke nicely to me. No matter what folks said he did. Spoke as nicely as he knew how." "You reckon he's crazy?" Miss Maudie shook her head. "If he's not, he should be by now. The things that happen to people we never really know. What happens in houses behind closed doors. What secrets? Atticus don't ever do anything to Jem and me in the house that he don't do in the yard," I said, feeling it my duty to defend my parent. "Gracious child, I was raveling a thread, wasn't even thinking about your father, but now that I am, I'll say this. Atticus Finch is the same in his house as he is on the public streets. How'd you like some fresh pound cake to take home? I liked it very much. Next morning when I awakened, I found Jem and Dill in the backyard, deep in conversation. When I joined them, as usual, they said go away. We'll not. This yard's as much mine as it is yours, Jem Finch. I got just as much right to play in it as you have. Dill and Jem emerged from a brief huddle. If you stay, you've got to do what we tell you, Dill warned. Will, I said, who's so high and mighty all of a sudden? If you don't say you'll do what we tell you, we ain't gonna tell you anything, Dill continued. You act like you grew 10 inches in the night. All right, what is it? Jem said placidly. We are going to give a note to Boo Radley. Just how? I was trying to fight down the automatic terror rising in me. It was all right for Miss Maudie to talk. She was old and snug on her porch. It was different for us. Jem was merely going to put the note on the end of a fishing pole and stick it through the shutters. If anyone came along, Dill would ring the bell. Dill raised his right hand. In it was my mother's silver dinner bell. I'm going around to the side of the house, said Jem. We looked yesterday from across the street, and there's a shutter loose. Think maybe I can make it stick on the windowsill at least. Jem, now you're in it, and you can't get out of it. You'll just stay in it, Miss Priss. Okay, but I don't want to watch. Jem, somebody was... Yes, you will. You'll watch the back end of the lot, and Dill's gonna watch the front of the house and up the street. And if anybody comes, he'll ring the bell. That clear? All right, then. What did you write him? Dill said. We're asking him real politely to come out sometimes and tell us what he does in there. We said we wouldn't hurt him, and we buy him an ice cream. You all have gone crazy. He'll kill us, Dill said. It's my idea. I figure if he'd come out and sit a spell with us, he might feel better. How do you know he don't feel good? Well, how'd you feel if you'd been shut up for 100 years with nothing but cats to eat? I bet he's got a beard down to here. Like your daddy's? He ain't got a beard, Dill stopped, as if trying to remember. Caught ya, I said. You said 'fore you were off the train good your daddy had a black beard. If it's all the same to you, he shaved it off last summer. Yeah, and I've got the letter to prove it. He sent me $2 too. Keep on. I reckon he even sent you a mounted police uniform. That never showed up, did it? You just keep on telling him, son. Dill Harris could tell the biggest ones I ever heard. Among other things, he had been up in a mail plane 17 times. He had been to Nova Scotia. He had seen an elephant. And his granddaddy was Brigadier General Joe Wheeler, and left him his sword. You all hush, said Jem. He scuttled beneath the house and came out with a yellow bamboo pole. Reckon this is long enough to reach from the sidewalk? Anybody who's brave enough to go up and touch the house hadn't ought to use a fishing pole, I said. Why don't you just knock the front door down? This is different, said Jem. How many times do I have to tell you that? Dill took a piece of paper from his pocket and gave it to Jem. The three of us walked cautiously toward the old house. Dill remained at the light pole on the front corner of the lot, and Jem and I edged down the sidewalk parallel to the side of the house. I walked beyond Jem and stood where I could see around the curve. All clear, I said. Not a soul in sight. Jem looked up the sidewalk to Dill, who nodded. Jem attached the note to the end of the fishing pole, let the pole out across the yard, and pushed it toward the window he had selected. The pole lacked several inches of being long enough, and Jem leaned over as far as he could. I watched him making jabbing motions for so long, I abandoned my post and went to him. Can't get it off the pole, he muttered. Or if I got it off, I can't make it stay. Come back down the street, Scout. I returned and gazed around the curve at the empty road. Occasionally, I looked back at Jem, who was patiently trying to place the note on the windowsill. It would flutter to the ground, and Jem would jab it up, until I thought,
If Boo Radley ever received it, he wouldn't be able to read it. I was looking down the street when the dinner bell rang. Shoulder up, I reeled around to face Boo Radley and his bloody fangs. Instead, I saw Dill ringing the bell with all his might in Atticus's face. Jem looked so awful, I didn't have the heart to tell him I told him so. He trudged along, dragging the pole behind him on the sidewalk. Atticus said, "Stop ringing that bell." Dill grabbed the clapper. In the silence that followed, I wished he'd start ringing it again. Atticus pushed his hat to the back of his head and put his hands on his hips. "Jem," he said, "what were you doing?" "Nothing, sir. I don't want any of that." "Tell me." We were just trying to give something to Mr. Radley." "What were you trying to give him?" "Just a letter." "Let me see it." Jem held out a filthy piece of paper. Atticus took it and tried to read it. "Why do you want Mr. Radley to come out?" Dill said, "We thought he might enjoy us," and dried up when Atticus looked at him. "Son," he said to Jem, "I'm going to tell you something and tell you one time. Stop tormenting that man. That goes for the other two of you. What Mr. Radley did was his own business. If he wanted to come out, he would. If he wanted to stay inside his own house, he had the right to stay inside, free from the attentions of inquisitive children, which was a mild term for the likes of us. How would we like it if Atticus busted on us without knocking when we were in our rooms at night? We were, in effect, doing the same thing to Mr. Radley. What Mr. Radley did might seem peculiar to us, but it did not seem peculiar to him. Furthermore, had it never occurred to us that the civil way to communicate with another being was by the front door instead of a side window? Lastly, we were to stay away from that house until we were invited there. We were not to play an asinine game he had seen us playing or make fun of anybody on this street or in this town. We weren't making fun of him. We weren't laughing at him, said Jem. We were just... So, that was what you were doing, wasn't it? Making fun of him? No, said Atticus. Putting his life's history on display for the edification of the neighborhood. Jem seemed to swell a little. I didn't say we were doing that, I didn't say it. Atticus grinned dryly. You just told me, he said. You stop this nonsense right now, every one of you. Jem gaped at him. You want to be a lawyer, don't you? Our father's mouth was suspiciously firm, as if he were trying to hold it in line. Jem decided there was no point in quibbling, and was silent. When Atticus went inside the house to retrieve a file he had forgotten to take to work that morning, Jem finally realized that he had been done in by the oldest lawyer's trick on record. He waited a respectful distance from the front steps, watched Atticus leave the house and walk toward town. When Atticus was out of earshot, Jem yelled after him, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, but I ain't so sure now. Next chapter. Yes, said our father, when Jem asked him if we could go over and sit by Miss Rachel's fish pool with Dill, as this was his last night in Maycomb. Tell him so long for me, and we'll see him next summer. We leaped over the low wall that separated Miss Rachel's yard from our driveway. Jem whistled Bob White, and Dill answered in the darkness. Not a breath blowing, said Jem. Look yonder. He pointed to the east. A gigantic moon was rising behind Miss Maudie's pecan trees. That makes it seem hotter, he said. Crossing it tonight? Asked Dill, not looking up. He was constructing a cigarette from newspaper and string. No, just the lady. Don't light that thing, Dill. You'll stink up this whole end of town. There was a lady in the moon in Maycomb. She sat at a dresser, combing her hair. We're gonna miss you, boy, I said. Reckon we better watch for Mr. Avery. Mr. Avery boarded across the street from Mrs. Henry Lafayette Dubos's house. Besides making change in the collection plate every Sunday, Mr. Avery sat on the porch every night until 9 o'clock and sneezed. One evening, we were privileged to witness a performance by him, which seemed to have been his positively last. Rachel's front steps one night stopped us. Golly, look yonder. He pointed across the street. At first we saw nothing but a kudzu-covered front porch,
but a closer inspection revealed an arc of water descending from the leaves and splashing in the yellow circle of the streetlight. Some 10 feet from source to earth, it seemed to us. Jem said Mr. Avery misfigured. Dill said
Offer declined. Looking for your next one.
drink a gallon a day, and the ensuing contest to determine relative distances and respective prowess only made me feel left out again, as I was untalented in this area. Dill stretched, yawned, and said altogether too casually, "I know what, let's go for a walk." He sounded fishy to me. Nobody Maycomb just went for a walk. "Where to, Dill?" Dill jerked his head in a southerly direction. Jem said, "Okay." When I protested, he said sweetly, "You don't have to come along, Angel May. You don't have to go. Remember." Jem was not one to dwell on past defeats. It seemed the only message he got from Atticus was insight into the art of cross-examination. "Scout, we ain't gonna do anything. We're just going to the streetlight and back." We strolled silently down the sidewalk, listening to porch swings creaking with the weight of the neighborhood, listening to the soft night murmurs of the grown people on our street. Occasionally we heard Miss Stephanie Crawford laugh. "Well," said Dill. "Okay," said Jem. "Why don't you go on home, Scout?" "What are you gonna do?" Dill and Jem were simply going to peep in the window with the loose shutter to see if they could get a look at Boo Radley. And if I didn't want to go with them, I could go straight home and keep my fat, flopping mouth shut. That was all. "But what in the Sam Holy Hill did you wait till tonight?" "Because nobody could see them at night. Because Atticus would be so deep in a book, he wouldn't hear the kingdom coming. Because if Boo Radley killed them, they'd miss school instead of vacation. And because it was easier to see inside a dark house in the dark than in the daytime. Did I understand?" "Jem, please." "Scout, I'm telling you for the last time. Shut your trap or go home. I declare to the Lord, you're getting more like a girl every day." With that, I had no option but to join them. We thought it was better to go under the high wire fence at the rear of the Radley lot. We stood less chance of being seen. The fence enclosed a large garden and a narrow wooden outhouse. Jem held up the bottom wire and motioned Dill under it. I followed and held up the wire for Jem. It was a tight squeeze for him. "Don't make a sound," he whispered. "Don't get in a row of collards, whatever you do. They'll wake the dead." With this thought in mind, I made perhaps one step per minute. But Dill, we can't get out of here so easy. "Shh! Sit on it, Scout." We spat ourselves dry, and Jem opened the gate slowly, lifting it aside and resting it on the fence. We were in the backyard. The back of the Radley house was less inviting than the front. A ramshackle porch ran the width of the house. There were 2 doors and 2 dark windows between the doors. Instead of a column, a rough 2x4 supported one end of the roof. The front stove sat in the corner of the porch. Above it, a hat-rack mirror caught the moon and shone eerily. Said Jem softly, lifting his foot. "Smatter. Chickens," he breathed. That we would be obliged to dodge the unseen from all directions was confirmed when Dill ahead of us spelled G-O-D in a whisper. We crept to the side of the house, around to the window with the hanging shutter. The sill was several inches taller than Jem. "Give you a hand up," he muttered to Dill. "Wait, though." Jem grabbed his left wrist and my right wrist.
I grabbed my left wrist and Jem's right wrist. We crouched, and Dill sat on our saddle. We raised him, and he caught the windowsill. "Hurry," Jem whispered. "We can't last much longer." Dill punched my shoulder, and we lowered him to the ground. "What did you see?" "Nothing. Curtains. There's a little teeny light way off somewhere, though." "Let's get away from here," breathed Jem. "Let's go round and back again." "Shh," he warned me, as I was about to protest. "Let's try the back window." "Dill, no," I said. Dill stopped and let Jem go ahead. When Jem put his foot on the bottom step, the step squeaked. He stood still, then tried his weight by degrees. The step was silent. Jem skipped 2 steps, put his foot on the porch, heaved himself to it, and teetered a long moment. He regained his balance and dropped to his knees. He crawled to the window, raised his head, and looked. Then I saw the shadow. It was the shadow of a man with a hat on. At first I thought it was a tree, but there was no wind blowing, and tree trunks never walked. The back porch was bathed in moonlight, and the shadow, crisp as toast, moved across the porch toward Jem. Dill saw it next. He put his hands to his face. When it crossed Jem, Jem saw it. He put his arms over his head and went rigid. The shadow stopped about a foot beyond Jem. Its arm came out from its side, dropped, and was still. Then it turned and moved back across Jem, walked along the porch and off the side of the house, returning as it had come. Jem leaped off the porch and galloped toward us. He flung open the gate, danced Dill and me through, and shooed us between 2 rows of swishing collards. Halfway through the collards I tripped. As I tripped, the roar of a shotgun shattered the neighborhood. Dill and Jem dived beside me. Jem's breath came in sobs. Fence by the schoolyard, Barry Scout. Jem held the bottom wire. Dill and I rolled through and were halfway to the shelter of the schoolyard's solitary oak, when we sensed that Jem was not with us.
We ran back and found him struggling in the fence, kicking his pants off to get loose. He ran to the oak tree in his shorts. Safely behind it, we gave way to numbness, but Jem's mind was racing. "We gotta get home. They'll miss us." We ran across the schoolyard, crawled under the fence to Deer's pasture behind our house, climbed our back fence and were at the back steps before Jem would let us pause to rest. Respiration normal. The 3 of us strolled as casually as we could to the front yard. We looked down the street and saw a circle of neighbors at the Radley front gate. "We better go down there," said Jem. "They'll think it's funny if we don't show up." Mr. Nathan Radley was standing inside his gate, a shotgun broken across his arm. Atticus was standing beside Miss Maudie and Miss Stephanie Crawford. Miss Rachel and Mr. Avery were nearby. None of them saw us come up. We eased in beside Miss Maudie, who looked around. "Where were you all? Didn't you hear the commotion?" "What happened?" asked Jem. "Mr. Radley shot."
Exculpatory evidence. In this case, you should be dismissed.
Yeah, I've got a DoorDash for...
At a Negro in his collared patch.
I've got a door... Hang on 1 second. I'm sorry. Nassim?
Go ahead, pull around, hon.
All right, thank you.
"Oh, did he hit him?" "No," said Miss Stephanie. "Shot in the air. Scared him pale, though. Says if anybody sees a white nigger around, that's the one. Says he's got the other barrel waiting for the next sound he hears in that patch. And next time he won't aim high. Be it dog, nigger, or Jem Finch." "Ma'am?" asked Jem. Atticus spoke. "Where are your pants, son?" "Pants, sir." Pants. It was no use. In his shorts before God and everybody. I sighed. Ah, Mr. Finch? In the glare from the streetlight, I could see Dill hatching one. His eyes widened. His fat cherub face grew rounder. What is it, Dill? Asked Atticus. Ah, I won 'em from him, he said vaguely. Won them? How? Dill's hand sought the back of his head. He brought it forward and across his forehead. We were playing strip poker up yonder by the fish pool, he said. Jem and I.
You're gonna rule the prosecutor. Rule. The prosecutor is telling you this dash camera. The audio is not important. Why did you give out a judge order to have an independent expert go and extract the audio off the dash camera? And went as far as put a protective order on the finding from the family. What you're saying is not important, but you're giving out an order to go and extract this not important audio? Wait a minute. So to dismiss, to rule against the motion to dismiss, you're going to decide it's not important. But here you are putting in a judge order to have an independent expert go in and extract the audio in September 16, 2025. So it must be important for you to issue out a judge order and go as far as put a protective order on it. I think the audio is not important. Why did you give out a judge order to have an independent expert go and extract the audio off the dash camera? And went as far as put a protective order on the finding from the family. What you're saying is not important, but you're giving out an order to go and extract this. I think the audio is not important. Why did you give out a judge order to have an independent expert go and extract the audio off the dash camera? And went as far as put a protective order on the finding from the, this is titled Judge Demanding a Protective Order. This is page 21, September 16, 2025. Page 21, line 4. And there would need to be a protective order limiting the disclosure of this to anyone outside the process, including the family. All right, so here's another question. This is titled when Judge Carol Weimer on September. Not important audio? Wait a minute. I think the audio is not important.
Axed. The neighbors seemed satisfied. They all stiffened. But what was strip poker? We had no chance to find out. Miss Rachel went off like the town fire siren. Duo Jesus, Dill Harris, gambling by my fishpool? I'll strip poker you, sir. Atticus saved Dill from immediate dismemberment. Just a minute, Miss Rachel, he said. I've never heard of him doing that before. Were you all playing cards? Jem fielded Dill's fly with his eyes shut. No, sir, just with matches. I admired my brother. Matches were dangerous, but cards were fatal. Jem, scout, said Atticus. I don't want to hear of poker in any form again. Go by Dill's and get your pants, Jem. Settle it yourselves. Don't worry, Dill, said Jem, as we trotted up the sidewalk. She ain't gonna get you. He'll talk her out of it. That was fast thinking, son. Listen, you hear? We stopped and heard Atticus's voice. Not serious. They all go through it, Miss Rachel. Dill was comforted, but Jem and I weren't. There was the problem of Jem showing up some pants in the morning. Give you some of mine, said Dill, as we came to Miss Rachel's steps. Jem said he couldn't get in them, but thanks anyway. We said goodbye, and Dill went inside the house. He evidently remembered he was engaged to me, for he ran back out and kissed me swiftly in front of Jem. "You all right here?" he bawled after us. Had Jem's pants been safely on him, we would not have slept much anyway. Every night sound I heard from my cot on the back porch was magnified threefold. Every scratch of feet on gravel was Boo Radley seeking revenge. Every passing Negro laughing in the night was Boo Radley loose and after us. Insects splashing against the screen were Boo Radley's insane fingers picking the wire to pieces. The chinaberry trees were malignant, hovering, alive. I lingered between sleep and wakefulness until I heard Jem murmur, "Sleep, little Three Eyes." "Are you crazy?" Atticus's lights out. In the waning moonlight, I saw Jem swing his feet to the floor. "I'm going after him," he said. I sat upright. "You can't. I won't let you." He was struggling into his shirt. "I've got to." "You do, and I'll wake up Atticus." "You do, and I'll kill you." I pulled him down beside me on the cot. I tried to reason with him. "Mister, Nathan's gonna find him in the morning, Jim. He knows you lost him. When he shows him to Atticus, it'll be pretty bad. That's all there is to it. Going back to bed." "That's what I know," said Jem. "That's why I'm going after him." I began to feel sick. Going back to that place by himself, I remembered Miss Stephanie. Mr. Nathan had the other barrel waiting for the next sound he heard, be it nigger, dog. Jem knew that better than I. I was desperate. "Look, it ain't worth it, Jem. A licking hurts, but it doesn't last. You'll get your head shot off, Jem. Please." He blew out his breath patiently. It's like this, Scout," he muttered. "Atticus ain't ever whipped me since I can remember. I want to keep it that way." This was a thought. It seemed that Atticus threatened us every other day. "You mean he's never caught you at anything?" "Maybe so, but I just want to keep it that way, Scout. We shouldn't have done that tonight, Scout." It was then, I suppose, that Jem and I first began to part company. Sometimes I did not understand him, but my periods of bewilderment were short-lived. This was beyond me. "Please," I pleaded, "can't you just think about it for a minute? By yourself on that place." "Shut up! It's not like he'd never speak to you again or something. I'm gonna wake him up, Jem. I swear I am." Jem grabbed my pajama collar and wrenched it tight. "Then I'm going with you." I choked. "No, you ain't. You'll just make noise." It was no use. I unlatched the back door and held it while he crept down the steps. It must have been 2 o'clock. The moon was setting and the lattice-work shadows were fading into fuzzy nothingness. Jem's white shirt tail dipped and bobbed like a small ghost, dancing away to escape the coming morning. A faint breeze stirred and cooled the sweat, running down my sides. He went the back way, through Deer's pasture, across the schoolyard, and around to the fence, I thought. At least that was the way he was headed. It would take longer, so it was not time to worry yet. I waited until it was time to worry and listened for Mr. Radley's shotgun. Then I thought I heard the back fence squeak. It was wishful thinking. Then I heard Atticus cough. I held my breath. Sometimes when we made a midnight pilgrimage to the bathroom, we would find him reading. He said he often woke up during the night, checked on us, and read himself back to sleep. I waited for his light to go on, straining my eyes to see it flood the hall. It stayed off, and I breathed again. The night crawlers had retired, but ripe china berries drummed on the roof when the wind stirred, and the darkness was desolate with the barking of distant dogs. There he was, returning to me. His white shirt bobbed over the back fence and slowly grew larger. He came up the back steps, latched the door behind him, and sat on his cot.
يا له من زمن جميل. يمكن انت عرفت اي واحد ديب فيك، بس صدقني في كتير غيرك ما عرفه. 100,000 تكنيك فيه، صارت بسنة انت بتعرفهم. بتعرف فيهم؟ يا له من زمن جميل. يمكن انت عرفت اي واحد ديب فيك، بس صدقني في كتير غيرك ما عرفه. 100,000 تكنيك فيه، صارت بسنة انت بتعرفهم.
Wordlessly, he held up his pants. He lay down, and for a while I heard his cot trembling. Soon he was still. I did not hear him stir again. Contents. Prev. Next chapter. 7. Jem stayed moody and silent for a week. As Atticus had once advised me to do, I tried to climb into Jem's skin and walk around in it. If I had gone alone to the Radley place at 2 in the morning,
Evidence. In this case, you should be dismissed.
Now,
this afternoon, so I left Jem alone and tried not to bother him. School started. The second grade was as bad as the first, only worse. They still flashed cards at you and wouldn't let you read or write. Miss Caroline's progress next door could be estimated by the frequency of laughter. However, the usual crew had flunked the first grade again and were helpful in keeping order. The only thing good about the second grade was that this year I had to stay as late as Jem, and we usually walked home together at 3 o'clock. One afternoon when we were crossing the schoolyard toward home,
Hello. Thank you. Thank you. Have a good night, you too.
Jem suddenly said, "There's something I didn't tell you." As this was his first complete sentence in several days, I encouraged him. "About what?" "About that night." "You've never told me anything about that night," I said. Jem waved my words away as if fanning gnats. He was silent for a while, then he said, "When I went back for my breeches, they were all in a tangle when I was getting out of them. I couldn't get them loose. When I went back," deep breath. "When I went back, they were folded across the fence, like they were expecting me. Across. And something else." Jem's voice was flat. "Show you when we get home. They'd been sewed up, not like a lady sewed them, like something I'd tried to do. All crooked. It's almost like somebody knew you were coming back for them." Jem shuddered, like somebody was reading my mind, like somebody could tell what I was gonna do. "Can't anybody tell what I'm gonna do lest they know me, can they, Scout?" Jem's question was an appeal. I reassured him. "Can't anybody tell what you're gonna do lest they live in the house with you? And even I can't tell sometimes." We were walking past our tree. In its knothole rested a ball of grey twine. "Don't take it, Jem," I said. "I don't think so, Scout." "Yes, it is. Some like Walter Cunningham comes down here every recess and hides his things, and we come along and take him away from him. Listen, let's leave it and wait a couple of days. If it ain't gone then, We'll take it, okay? Okay, you might be right, said the bigger folks. You know it's only when school's in that we've found things. Yeah, I said, but we never go by here in the summertime. We went home. Next morning the twine was where we had left it. When it was still there on the third day, Jem pocketed it. From then on, we considered everything we found in the knothole our property. The second grade was grim, but Jem assured me that the older I got, the better school would be, that he started off the same way, and it was not until one reached the sixth grade that one learned anything of value. The sixth grade seemed to please him from the beginning. He went through a brief Egyptian period that baffled me. He tried to walk flat a great deal, sticking one arm in front of him and one in back of him, putting one foot behind the other. He declared Egyptians walked that way. I said if they did, I didn't see how they got anything done. But Jem said they accomplished more than the Americans ever did. They invented toilet paper and perpetual embalming, and asked, where would we be today if they hadn't? Atticus told me to delete the adjectives and I'd have the facts. There are no clearly defined seasons in South Alabama. Summer drifts into autumn, and autumn is sometimes never followed by winter, but turns to a days-old spring that melts into summer again. That fall was a long one, hardly cool enough for a light jacket. Jem and I were trotting in our orbit one mild October afternoon, when our knothole stopped us again. Something white was inside this time. Jem let me do the honors. I pulled out two small images carved in soap. One was the figure of a boy, the other wore a crude dress. Before I remembered that there was no such thing as hoodooing, I shrieked and threw them down. Jem snatched them up. What's the matter with you? He yelled. He rubbed the figures free of red dust. These are good, he said. I've never seen any of these good. He held them down to me. They were almost perfect miniatures of two children. The boy had on shorts, and a shock of soapy hair fell to his eyebrows. I looked up at Jem. A point of straight brown hair kicked downwards from his part. I had never noticed it before. Jem looked from the girl doll to me. The girl doll wore bangs. So did I. These are us, he said. Who did 'em, you reckon? Who do we know around here who whittles? He asked. Mr. Avery. Mr. Avery just does like this. I mean carves. Mr. Avery averaged a stick of stove wood per week. He honed it down to a toothpick and chewed it. There's old Miss Stephanie Crawford's sweetheart, I said. He carves all right, but he lives down the country. When would he ever pay any attention to us? Maybe he sits on the porch and looks at us instead of Miss Stephanie. If I was him, I would. Jem stared at me so long I asked what was the matter. But got nothing. Scout for an answer. When we went home, Jem put the dolls in his trunk. Less than 2 weeks later, we found a whole package of chewing gum, which we enjoyed. The fact that everything on the Radley place was poison having slipped Jem's memory. The following week, The knothole yielded a tarnished medal. Jem showed it to Atticus, who said it was a spelling medal that before we were born, the Maycomb County schools had spelling contests and awarded medals to the winners. Atticus said someone must have lost it, and had we asked around? Jem camel kicked me when I tried to say where we had found it. Jem and Atticus said no. Our big appeared 4 days later. It was a pocket watch that wouldn't run, on a chain with an aluminum knife. You reckon it's white gold, Jem? Don't know. I'll show it to Atticus. Atticus said it would probably be worth $10, knife, chain and all, if it were new. Did you swap with somebody at school? He asked. Oh, no, sir. Jem pulled out his grandfather's watch that Atticus let him carry once a week if Jem were careful with it. On the days he carried the watch, Jem walked on eggs. Atticus, if it's all right with you, I'd rather have this one instead. Maybe I can figure. When the new wore off his grandfather's watch, and carrying it became a day's burdensome task, Jem no longer felt the necessity of ascertaining the hour every 5 minutes. He did a fair job, only one spring, and 2 tiny pieces left over. But the watch would not run. Oh, he sighed. Never go. Scout, huh? You reckon we ought to write a letter to whoever's leaving us these things? That'd be right nice, Jem. We can thank him. What's wrong? Jem was holding his ears, shaking his head from side to side. I don't get it. I just don't get it. I don't know why, Scout. He looked toward the living room. I've got a good mind to tell Atticus. No, I reckon not. I'll tell him for you. No, don't do that, Scout. Scout. What? He had been on the verge of telling me something all evening. His face would brighten, and he would lean toward me. Then he would change his mind. He changed it again. Oh, nothing. Here, let's write a letter. I pushed a tablet and pencil under his nose. Okay. Dear Mr. How do you know it's a man? I bet it's Miss Maudie. Been betting that for a long time. Miss Maudie can't chew gum. Jem broke into a grin. You know, she can talk real pretty sometimes. One time I asked her to have a chew, and she said no thanks, that chewing gum cleaved to her palate and rendered her speechless, said Jem carefully. Doesn't that sound nice? Yeah, she can say nice things sometimes. She wouldn't have a watch and chain anyway. Dear sir, said Jem, we appreciate everything which you have put into the tree for us. Yours very truly, Jeremy Atticus Finch. He won't know who you are if you sign it like that, Jem. Jem erased his name and wrote, Jem Finch. I signed, Jean-Louis Finch, Scout, beneath it. Jem put the note in an envelope. Next morning on the way to school, he ran ahead of me and stopped at the tree. Jem was facing me when he looked up, and I saw him go stark white. Scout, I ran to him. Someone had filled our knothole with cement. Don't you cry now, Scout. Don't cry now. Don't you worry. He muttered at me all the way to school. When we went home for dinner, Jem bolted his food, ran to the porch, and stood on the steps. I followed him. Hasn't passed by yet, he said. Next day, Jem repeated his vigil and was rewarded. Howdy-do, Mr. Nathan, he said. Morning, Jem Scout, said Mr. Radley as he went by. Mr. Radley, said Jem. Mr. Radley turned around. Mr. Radley, did you put cement in that hole in that tree down yonder? Yes, he said. I filled it up. Why'd you do it, sir? Tree's dying. You plug them with cement when they're sick. You ought to know that, Jem. Jem said nothing more about it until late afternoon. When we passed our tree, he gave it a meditative pat on its cement and remained deep in thought. He seemed to be working himself into a bad humor, so I kept my distance. As usual, we met Atticus coming home from work that evening. When we were at our steps, Jem said, Atticus, look down yonder at that tree, he said. What tree, son? The one in the corner of the Radley walk coming from school. Yes? Is that tree down? No, son, I don't think so. Look at the leaves, they're all green and full. No brown patches anywhere. It ain't even sick. That tree's as healthy as you are, Jem. Why? Mr. Nathan Radley said it was dying. Well, maybe it is. I'm sure Mr. Radley knows more about his trees than we do. Atticus left us on the porch. Jem leaned on a pillar, rubbing his shoulders against it. Do you itch, Jem? I asked as politely as I could. He did not answer. Come on in, Jem, I said. After a while. He stood there until nightfall, and I waited for him. When we went in the house, I saw he had been crying. His face was dirty in the right places, but I thought it odd that I had not heard him. Contents. Prev. Next. Chapter 8. For reasons unfathomable to the most experienced prophets in Maycomb County, autumn turned to winter that year. We had 2 weeks of the coldest weather since 1885, Atticus said. Mr. Avery said it was written on the Rosetta Stone that when children disobeyed their parents, smoked cigarettes and made war on each other, the seasons would change. Jem and I were burdened with the guilt of contributing to the aberrations of nature, thereby causing unhappiness to our neighbors and discomfort to ourselves. Old Mrs. Radley died that winter, but her death caused hardly a ripple. The neighborhood seldom saw her, except when she watered her cannas. Jem and I decided that Boo had got her at last, but when Atticus returned from the Radley house, he said she died of natural causes, to our disappointment. Ask him, Jem whispered. You ask him. You're the oldest. That's why you ought to ask him. Atticus, I said. Did you see Mr. Arthur? Atticus looked sternly around his newspaper at me. I did not. Jem restrained me from further questions. He said Atticus was still touchish about us and the Radleys, and it wouldn't do to push him any. Jem had a notion that Atticus thought our activities that night
Why did you give out a judge order to have an independent expert go and extract the audio off the dash camera? No rule. The audio is not important. How is a dash camera cut before impact? Let's watch. Important. How is a dash camera cut before impact? Let's watch. Exculpatory evidence. The audio is not important. The audio is not important. Why giving out an order? The family. Wait, you're saying it's not important, but you're giving out an order to go and extract this not important audio? So to dismiss, to rule against the motion to dismiss, you're going to decide it's not important. But here you are putting in a judge order to have an independent expert go in and extract the audio in September 16, 2025. So it must be important for you to issue out a judge order and go as far as put a protective order on it. And there would need to be a protective order limiting the disclosure of this to anyone outside the process, including the family. All right, so here's another question. When Judge Carol Weimer on September 16, 2025, issued an order to have an independent expert go in and extract the audio, what did Prosecutor Sarah Sammy tell the judge? Did Prosecutor Sarah Sammy tell Judge Carol Weimer, Your Honor, I need my expert to extract the audio first before the independent expert from Mustafa's defense extracted? Wait a minute. I thought you're telling the judge in the motion to dismiss that it's not important. But here you are telling him that you need your independent expert to go in first? Are you being honest with us in the motion to dismiss? Or are you being honest with us on September 16, 2025? Are you lying then or are you lying now? I think the audio is not important. Why did you give out a judge order to have an independent expert go and extract the audio off the dash camera? And went as far as put a protective order on the finding from the family. Wait, you're saying it's not important, but you're giving out an order to go and extract this not important audio? So to dismiss, to rule against the motion to dismiss, you're going to decide it's not important. But here you are putting in a judge order to have an independent expert go in and extract the audio in September 16, 2025. So it must be important for you to issue. I think the audio is not important. Why did you
were not solely confined to strip poker. Jem had no firm basis for his ideas. He said it was merely a twitch. Next morning I awoke, looked out the window, and nearly died of fright. My screams brought Atticus from his bathroom half-shaven. "The world's ending, Atticus! Please do something!" I dragged him to the window and pointed. "No, it's not," he said. "It's snowing." Jem asked Atticus would it keep up. Jem had never seen snow either, but he knew what it was. Atticus.
What the fuck are y'all doing out here?
Said he didn't know any more about snow than Jem did. "I think, though, if it's watery like that, it'll turn to rain." The telephone rang, and Atticus left the breakfast table to answer it. "That was Eula May," he said when he returned. I quote, "As it has not snowed in Maycomb County since 1885, there will be no school today." Eula May was Maycomb's leading telephone operator. She was entrusted with issuing public announcements, wedding invitations, setting off the fire siren, and giving first aid instructions when Dr. Reynolds was away. When Atticus finally called us to order and bade us look at our plates, instead of out the windows, Jem asked, "How do you make a snowman?" "I haven't the slightest idea," said Atticus. "I don't want you all to be disappointed, but I doubt if there'll be enough snow for a snowball even." Calpurnia came in and said she thought it was sticking. When we ran to the backyard, it was covered with a feeble layer of soggy snow. "We shouldn't walk about in it," said Jem. "Look, every step you take's wasting it." I looked back at my mushy footprints. Jem said if we waited until it snowed some more, we could scrape it all up for a snowman. I stuck out my tongue and caught a fat flake. It burned. "Jem, it's hot." "No, it ain't. It's so cold it burns. Now don't eat it, Scout. You're wasting it. Let it come down. But I want to walk in it." "I know what. We can go walk over at Miss Maudie's." Jem hopped across the front yard. I followed in his tracks. When we were on the sidewalk in front of Miss Maudie's, Mr. Avery accosted us. He had a pink face and a big stomach below his belt. "See what you've done?" he said. "Hasn't snowed in Maycomb since Appomattox. It's bad children like you makes the seasons change." I wondered if Avery knew how hopefully we had watched last summer for him to repeat his performance, and reflected that if this was our reward, there was something to say for sin. I did not wonder where Mr. Avery gathered his meteorological statistics. They came straight from the Rosetta Stone. "Jem Finch, you Jem Finch. Miss Maudie's calling you, Jem. You all stay in the middle of the yard. There's some thrift buried under the snow near the porch. Don't step on it." "Yes'm," called Jem. "It's beautiful, ain't it, Miss Maudie?" "Beautiful, my hind foot. If it freezes tonight, it'll carry off all my azaleas." Miss Maudie's old sun hat glistened with snow crystals. She was bending over some small bushes, wrapping them in burlap bags. Jem asked her what she was doing that for. "Keep 'em warm," she said. "How can flowers keep warm? They don't circulate." "I cannot answer that question, Jem Finch. All I know is, if it freezes tonight, these plants will freeze, so you cover 'em up. Is that clear?" "Yes, some. Miss Maudie, could Scout and me borrow some of your snow?" "Heavens alive, take it all. There's an old peach basket under the house, haul it off in that." Miss Maudie's eyes narrowed. "Jem Finch, what are you going to do with my snow?" "You'll see," said Jem, and we transferred as much snow as we could from Miss Maudie's yard to ours, a slushy operation. "What are we going to do, Jem?" I asked. "You'll see," he said. "Now get the basket and haul all the snow you can rake up from the backyard to the front. Walk back in your tracks, though," he cautioned. "Are we going to have a snow baby, Jem?" "No, a real snowman. Gotta work."
Yeah, I've got a DoorDash for Loki.
Go around.
Oh, thank you. Hello. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jem ran to the backyard, produced the garden hoe, and began digging quickly behind the woodpile, placing any worms he found to one side. He went in the house, returned with the laundry hamper, filled it with earth, and carried it to the front yard. When we had 5 baskets of earth and 2 baskets of snow, Jem said we were ready to begin. "Don't you think this is kind of a mess?" I asked. "Looks messy now, but it won't later," he said. Jem scooped up an armful of dirt, patted it into a mound, on which he added another load and another, until he had constructed a torso. "Jem, I ain't ever heard of a nigger snowman," I said. "He won't be black long," he grunted. Jem procured some peach tree switches from the backyard, flatted them, and bent them into bones to be covered with dirt. "He looks like Stephanie Crawford with her hands on her hips," I said. "Fat in the middle and little bitty arms. I'll make 'em bigger." Jem sloshed water over the mudman and added more dirt. He looked thoughtfully at it for a moment, then he molded a big stomach below the figure's waistline. Jem glanced at me, his eyes twinkling. "Mr. Avery's sort of shaped like a snowman, ain't he?" Jem scooped up some snow and began plastering it on. He permitted me to cover only the back, saving the public parts for himself. Gradually, Mr. Avery turned white. Using bits of wood for eyes, nose, mouth, and buttons, Jem succeeded in making Mr. Avery look cross. A stick of stove wood completed the picture. Jem stepped back and viewed his creation. "It's lovely, Jem," I said. "Looks almost like he talked to you." "It is, ain't it?" he said shyly. We could not wait for Atticus to come home for dinner, but called and said we had a big surprise for him. He seemed surprised when he saw most of the backyard and the front yard, but he said we had done a Jim Dandy job. "I didn't know how you were going to do it," he said to Jem. "But from now on, I'll never worry about what'll become of your son. You'll always have an idea." Jem's ears reddened from Atticus's compliment, but he looked up sharply when he saw Atticus stepping back. Atticus squinted at the snowman a while. He grinned, then laughed. "Son, I can't tell what you're going to be, an engineer, a lawyer, or a portrait painter. You've perpetrated a near libel here in the front yard. We've got to disguise this fellow." Atticus suggested that Jem hone down his creation's front a little, swap a broom for the stove wood, and put an apron on him. Jem explained that if he did, the snowman would become muddy and cease to be a snowman. "I don't care what you do, so long as you do something," said Atticus. "You can't go around making caricatures of the neighbors." "Ain't a caricature," said Jem. "It looks just like him. Mr. Avery might not think so." "I know what," said Jem. He raced across the street, disappeared into Miss Maudie's backyard, and returned triumphant. He stuck her sun hat on the snowman's head and jammed her hedge clipper in the crook of his arm. Atticus said that would be fine. Miss Maudie opened her front door and came out on the porch. She looked across the street at us. Suddenly she Jem Finch, she called. You devil, bring me back my hat, sir. Jem looked up at Atticus, who shook his head. She's just fussing, he said. She's really impressed with your accomplishments. Atticus strolled over to Miss Maudie's sidewalk, where they engaged in an arm-waving conversation, the only phrase of which I caught was, "Erected an absolute morphodite in that yard. Atticus, you'll never raise him." The snow stopped in the afternoon, the temperature dropped, and by nightfall, Mr. Avery's direst predictions came true. Calpurnia kept every fireplace in the house blazing, but we were cold. When Atticus came home that evening, he said we were in for it, and asked Calpurnia if she wanted to stay with us for the night. Calpurnia glanced up at the high ceilings and long windows, and said she thought she'd be warmer at her house. Atticus drove her home in the car. Before I went to sleep, Atticus put more coal on the fire in my room. He said the thermometer registered 16, that it was the coldest night in his memory, and that our snowman outside was frozen solid. Minutes later, it seemed, I was awakened by someone shaking me. Atticus's overcoat was spread across me. "Is it morning already?" "Baby, get up." Atticus was holding out my bathrobe and coat. "Put your robe on first," he said. Jem was standing beside Atticus, groggy and tousled. He was holding his overcoat closed at the neck. His other hand was jammed into his pocket. He looked strangely overweight. "Hurry, hon," said Atticus. "Here are your shoes and socks." Stupidly, I put them on. "Is it morning?" "No, it's a little after 1. Hurry now." That something was wrong finally got through to me. "What's the matter?" By then, he did not have to tell me. Just as the birds know where to go when it rains, I knew when there was trouble in our street. Soft taffeta-like sounds and muffled scurrying sounds filled me with helpless dread. "Whose is it?" "Miss Maudie's, hon," said Atticus gently. At the front door, we saw fire spewing from Miss Maudie's dining room windows. As if to confirm what we saw, the town fire siren wailed up the scale to a treble pitch and remained there screaming. "It's gone, ain't it?" moaned Jem. "I expect so," said Atticus. "Now listen, both of you. Go down and stand in front of the Radley place. Keep out of the way, do you hear? See which way the wind's blowing?" "Oh," said Jem. "Atticus, reckon we ought to start moving the furniture out?" "Not yet, son. Do as I tell you. Run now. Take care of Scout, you hear? Don't let her out of your sight." With a push, Atticus started us toward the Radley front gate. We stood watching the street fill with men and cars, while fire silently devoured Miss Maudie's house. "Why don't they hurry? Why don't they hurry?" muttered Jem. We saw why. The old fire truck, killed by the cold, was being pushed from town by a crowd of men. When the men attached its hose to a hydrant, the hose burst and water shot up, tinkling down on the pavement. "Oh, Lord, Jem." Jem put his arm around me. "Hush, Scout," he said. "It ain't time to worry yet. I'll let you know when." The men of Maycomb, in all degrees of dress and undress, took furniture from Miss Maudie's house to a yard across the street. I saw Atticus carrying Miss Maudie's heavy oak rocking chair, and thought it sensible of him to save what she valued most. Sometimes we heard shouts. Then Mr. Avery's face appeared in an upstairs window. He pushed a mattress out the window into the street and threw down furniture until men shouted, "Come down from there, Dick! The stairs are going! Get out of there, Mr. Avery!" Mr. Avery began climbing through the window. "Scout, he's stuck," breathed Jem. "Oh, God." Mr. Avery was wedged tightly. I buried my head under Jem's arm and didn't look again until Jem cried, "He's got loose, Scout! He's all right!" I looked up to see...
saying the audio is not important, why did you give out a judge order to have an independent expert go and extract the audio off the dash camera? And went as far as put a protective order on the finding from the family. Wait, you're saying it's not important, but you're giving out an order to go and extract this not important audio? So to dismiss, to rule against the motion to dismiss, you're going to decide it's not important. But here you are putting in a judge order to have an independent expert go in and extract the audio in September 16, 2025. So it must be important for you to issue out a judge order.
Mr. Avery crossed the upstairs porch. He swung his legs over the railing and was sliding down a pillar when he slipped. He fell, yelled, and hit Miss Maudie's shrubbery. Suddenly, I noticed that the men were backing away from Miss Maudie's house, moving down the street toward us. They were no longer carrying furniture. The fire was well into the second floor and had eaten its way to the roof. Window frames were black against a vivid orange center. Jem, it looks like a pumpkin. Scout, look. Smoke was rolling off our house and Miss Rachel's house like fog off a riverbank, and men were pulling hoses toward them. Behind us, the fire truck from Abbotsville screamed around the curve and stopped in front of our house. That book, I said. What? Said Jem. That Tom Swift book. It ain't mine. It's Dill's. Don't worry, Scout. It ain't time to worry yet, said Jem. He pointed. Look yonder. In a group of neighbors, Atticus was standing with his hands in his overcoat pockets. He might have been watching a football game.
Yeah, hello? Hello?
Hi, one moment.
All right, thank you.
OS.
Hi, sorry, you trying to place the order? Pick up.
I've got a DoorDash for Jamario.
Okay, second one up, please.
All right, thank you.
Maudie was beside him. Not worried yet, said Jem. Why ain't he on top of one of the houses? He's too old. He'd break his neck. You think we ought to make him get our stuff out? Let's don't pester him. He'll know when it's time, said Jem. The Abbotsville fire truck began pumping water on our house. A man on the roof pointed to places that needed it most. I watched our absolute morphodite go black and crumble. Miss Maudie's sun hat settled on top of the heap. I could not see her hedge clippers. In the heap between our house, Miss Rachel's and Miss Maudie's, the men had long ago shed coats and bathrobes. They worked in pajama tops and nightshirts, stuffed into their pants, but I became aware that I was slowly freezing where I stood. Jem tried to keep me warm, but his arm was not enough. I pulled free of it and clutched my shoulders. By dancing a little, I could feel my feet. Another fire truck appeared and stopped in front of Miss Stephanie Crawford's. There was no hydrant for another hose, and the men tried to soak her house with hand extinguishers. Miss Maudie's tin roof quelled the flames. Roaring, the house collapsed. Fire gushed everywhere, followed by a flurry of blankets from men on top of the adjacent houses, beating out sparks and burning chunks of wood. It was dawn before the men began to leave, first one by one, then in groups. They pushed the Maycomb fire truck back to town. The Abbotsville truck departed, the third one remained. We found out next day it had come from Clark's Ferry, 60 miles away. Jem and I slid across the street. Miss Maudie was staring at the smoking black hole in her yard, and Atticus shook his head to tell us she did not want to talk. He led us home, holding onto our shoulders to cross the icy street. He said Miss Maudie would stay with Miss Stephanie for the time being. "Anybody want some hot chocolate?" he asked. I shuddered when Atticus started a fire in the kitchen stove. As we drank our cocoa, I noticed Atticus looking at me, first with curiosity, then with sternness. "I thought I told you and Jem to stay put," he said. "Why, we did. We stayed." "Then whose blanket is that?" "Blanket? Yes, ma'am, blanket. It isn't ours." I looked down and found myself clutching a brown woolen blanket I was wearing around my shoulders, squaw fashion. "Atticus, I don't know, sir. I turned to Jem for an answer, but Jem was even more bewildered than I. He said he didn't know how it got there. We did exactly as Atticus had told us. We stood down by the Radley gate away from everybody. We didn't move an inch. Jem stopped. "Mr. Nathan was at the fire," he babbled. I saw him. He was tugging that mattress. "Atticus, I swear." "That's all right, son." Atticus grinned slowly. "Looks like all of Maycomb was out tonight, in one way or another. Jem, there's some wrapping paper in the pantry, I think. Go get it, Emma." "Atticus, no, sir." Jem seemed to have lost his mind. He began pouring out our secrets right and left in total disregard for my safety, if not for his own, omitting nothing, knothole, pants and all. "Mr. Nathan put cement in that tree, Atticus, and he did it to stop us finding things. He's crazy, I reckon, like they say. But Atticus, I swear to God, he ain't ever harmed us. He ain't ever hurt us. He could have cut my throat from ear to ear that night, but he tried to mend my pants instead. He ain't ever hurt us, Atticus." Atticus said, "Whoa, son," so gently that I was greatly heartened. It was obvious that he had not followed a word Jem said, for all Atticus said was, "You're right. We'd better keep this in the blanket to ourselves. Someday, maybe, Scout can thank him for covering her up." "Thank who?" I asked. "Boo Radley. You were so busy looking at the fire you didn't know it when he put the blanket around you." My stomach turned to water and I nearly threw up when Jem held out the blanket and crept toward me. "He sneaked out of the house, turned around, sneaked up and went like this," Atticus said dryly. "Do not let this inspire you to further glory, Jeremy." Jem scowled. "I ain't gonna do anything to him." But I watched the spark of fresh adventure leave his eyes. "Just think, Scout," he said. "If you'd just turned around, you'd have seen him." Calpurnia woke us at noon. Atticus had said we need not go to school that day. We'd learn nothing after no sleep. Calpurnia said for us to try and clean up the front yard. Miss Maudie's sun hat was suspended in a thin layer of ice, like a fly in amber, and we had to dig under the dirt for her hedge clippers. We found her in her backyard, gazing at her frozen charred azaleas. "We're bringing back your things, Miss Maudie," said Jem. "We're awful sorry." Miss Maudie looked around, and the shadow of her old grin crossed her face. "Always wanted a smaller house, Jem Finch. Gives me more yard. Just think, I'll have more room for my azaleas now." "You ain't grieving, Miss Maudie?" I asked, surprised. Atticus said her house was nearly all she had. Grieving child? Why, I hated that old cow barn. Thought of setting fire to it 100 times myself, except they'd lock me up. But don't you worry about me, John Louise Finch. There are ways of doing things you don't know about. Why, I'll build me a little house and take me a couple of roomers and, gracious, I'll have the finest yard in Alabama. Those Bellingraths will look plain puny when I get started. Jem and I looked at each other. How'd it catch, Miss Maudie? He asked. I don't know, Jem. Probably the flue in the kitchen. I kept a fire in there last night for my potted plants. Hear you had some unexpected company last night, Miss Jean Luce. How'd you know? Atticus told me on his way to town this morning. Tell you the truth, I'd like to have been with you. And I'd have had sense enough to turn around too. Miss Maudie puzzled me. With most of her possessions gone, and her beloved yard a shambles, she still took a lively and cordial interest in Jem's and my affairs. She must have seen my perplexity. She said, only thing I worried about last night was all the danger and commotion it caused. This whole neighborhood could have gone up. Mr. Avery will be in bed for a week. He's right stove up. He's too old to do things like that, and I told him so. Soon as I can get my hands clean and when Stephanie Crawford's not looking, I'll make him a lane cake. That Stephanie's been after my recipe for 30 years, and if she thinks I'll give it to her just because I'm staying with her, she's got another think coming. I reflected that if Miss Maudie broke down and gave it to her, Miss Stephanie couldn't follow it anyway. Miss Maudie had once let me see it. Among other things, the recipe called for 1 large cup of sugar. It was a still day. The air was so cold and clear, we heard the courthouse clock clank, rattle, and strain before it struck the hour. Miss Maudie's nose was a color I'd never seen before, and I inquired about it. I've been out here since 6 o'clock, she said. Should be frozen by now. She held up her hands. A network of tiny lines crisscrossed her palms, brown with dirt and dried blood. You've ruined them, said Jem. Why don't you get a colored man? There was no note of sacrifice in his voice when he added, or Scout and me, we can help you. Miss Maudie said,
Offer accepted. We'll add it to your route.
Thank you, sir, but you got a job of your own over there. She pointed to our yard. You mean the morphodite? I asked. Shoot, we can rake him up in a jiffy. Miss Maudie stared down at me, her lips moving silently. Suddenly she put her hands to her head and whooped. When we left her, she was still chuckling. Jem said he didn't know what was the matter with her. That was just Miss Maudie. Contents. Prev. Next chapter. 9. You can just take that back, boy. This order, given by me to Cecil Jacobs, was the beginning of a rather thin time for Jem and me. My fists were clenched, and I was ready to let fly. Atticus had promised me he would wear me out if he ever heard of me fighting anymore. I was far too old and too big for such childish things, and the sooner I learned to hold in, the better off everybody would be. I soon forgot. Cecil Jacobs made me forget. He had announced in the schoolyard the day before that Scout Finch's daddy defended niggers. I denied it, but told Jem. What did he mean saying that? I asked. Nothing, Jem said. Ask Atticus, he'll tell you. Do you defend niggers, Atticus? I asked him that evening. Of course I do. Don't say nigger, Scout. That's common, is what everybody at school says. From now on, it'll be everybody less one. Well, if you don't want me to grow up talking that way, why do you send me to school? My father looked at me mildly, amusement in his eyes. Despite our compromise, my campaign to avoid school had continued in one form or another since my first day's dose of it. The beginning of last September had brought on sinking spells, dizziness, and mild gastric complaints. I went so far as to pay a nickel for the privilege of rubbing my head against the head of Miss Rachel's cook's son, who was afflicted with a tremendous ringworm. It didn't take. But I was worrying another bone. Do all lawyers defend Negroes, Atticus? Of course they do, Scout. Then why did Cecil say you defended niggers? He made it sound like you were running a still. Atticus sighed. I'm simply defending a Negro. His name's Tom Robinson. He lives in that little settlement beyond the town dump. He's a member of Calpurnia's church, and Cal knows his family well. She says they're clean living folks. Scout, you aren't old enough to understand some things yet, but there's been some high talk around town to the effect that I shouldn't do much about defending this man. It's a peculiar case. It won't come to trial until summer session. John Taylor was kind enough to give us a postponement. If you shouldn't be defending him, then why are you doing it? For a number of reasons, said Atticus. The main one is, if I didn't, I couldn't hold up my head in town. I couldn't represent this county in the legislature. I couldn't even tell you, or Jem, not to do something again. You mean, if you didn't defend that man, Jem and me wouldn't have to mind you anymore? That's about right. Why? Because I could never ask you to mind me again. Scout, simply by the nature of the work. Every lawyer gets at least one case in his lifetime that affects him personally. This one's mine, I guess. You might hear some ugly talk about it at school, but do one thing for me if you will. You just hold your head high and keep those fists down. No matter what anybody says to you, don't you let them get your goat. Try fighting with your head for a change. It's a good one, even if it does resist learning. Atticus, are we going to win it? No, honey. Then why? Simply because we were licked 100 years before we started is no reason for us not to try to win, Atticus said. You sound like Cousin Ike Finch, I said. Cousin Ike Finch was Maycomb County's sole surviving Confederate veteran. He wore a General Hood-type beard, of which he was inordinately vain. At least once a year, Atticus, Jem, and I called on him, and I would have to kiss him. It was horrible. Jem and I would listen respectfully to Atticus and Cousin Ike rehash the war. Tell you, Atticus, Cousin Ike would say, the Missouri Compromise was what licked us, but if I had to go through it again, I'd walk every step of the way there, and every step back, just like I did before, and furthermore, we'd whip him. in 1864, when Stonewall Jackson came around by, I beg your pardon, young folks. Old Blue Light was in heaven then. God rest his saintly brow. Come here, Scout, said Atticus. I crawled into his lap and tucked my head under his chin. He put his arms around me and rocked me gently. It's different this time, he said. This time we aren't fighting the Yankees. We're fighting our friends. But remember this, no matter how bitter things get, they're still our friends, and this is still our home. With this in mind, I faced Cecil Jacobs in the schoolyard next day. You gonna take that back, boy? You gotta make me first, he yelled. My folks said your daddy was a disgrace, and that nigger ought to hang from the water tank. I drew a bead on him, remembered what Atticus had said, then dropped my fists and walked away. Scout's a cow. Ward, ringing in my ears. It was the first time I ever walked away from a fight. Somehow, if I fought Cecil, I would let Atticus down. Atticus so rarely asked Jem and me to do something for him, I could take being called a coward for him. I felt extremely noble for having remembered, and remained noble for 3 weeks. And disaster struck. Jem and I viewed Christmas with mixed feelings. The good side was the tree, and Uncle Jack Finch. Every Christmas Eve day, we met Uncle Jack at Maycomb Junction, and he would spend a week with us. A flip of the coin revealed the uncompromising lineaments of Aunt Alexandra and Francis. I suppose I should include Uncle Jimmy, Aunt Alexandra's husband. But as he never spoke a word to me in my life, except to say, "Get off the fence." Once, I never saw any reason to take notice of him. Neither did Aunt Alexandra. Long ago, in a burst of friendliness, Auntie and Uncle Jimmy produced a son named Henry, who left home as soon as was humanly possible, married, and produced Francis. Henry and his wife deposited Francis at his grandparents' every Christmas, then pursued their own pleasures. No amount of sighing could induce Atticus to let us spend Christmas Day at home. We went to Finch's Landing every Christmas in my memory. The fact that Auntie was a good cook was some compensation for being forced to spend a religious holiday with Francis and I avoided him on principle. He enjoyed everything I disapproved of, and disliked my ingenuous diversions. Aunt Alexandra was Atticus's sister, but when Jem told me about changelings and siblings, I decided that she had been swapped at birth, that my grandparents had perhaps received a Crawford instead of a Finch. Had I ever harbored mystical notions about mountains that seemed to obsess lawyers and judges, Aunt Alexandra would have been analogous to Mount Everest. Throughout my early life, she was cold and bare. When Uncle Jack jumped down from the train Christmas Eve day, we had to wait for the porter to hand him 2 long packages. When Uncle Jack pecked Atticus on the cheek, they were the only 2 men we ever saw kiss each other. Uncle Jack shook hands with Jem and swung me high, but not high enough. Uncle Jack was a head shorter than Atticus, the baby of the family. He was younger than Aunt Alexandra. He and Auntie looked alike, but Uncle Jack made better use of his face. We were never wary of his sharp nose and chin. He was one of the few men of science who never terrified me, probably because he never behaved like a doctor. Whenever he performed a minor service for Jem and me, as removing a splinter from a foot, he would tell us exactly what he was going to do, give us an estimation of how much it would hurt, and explain the use of any tongs he employed. One Christmas I lurked in corners, nursing a twisted splinter in my foot, permitting no one to come near me. When Uncle Jack caught me, he kept me laughing about a preacher who hated going to church so much that every day he stood at his gate in his dressing gown, smoking a hookah and delivering 5-minute sermons to any passers-by who desired spiritual comfort. I interrupted to make Uncle Jack let me know when he would pull it out, but he held up a bloody splinter and a pair of tweezers and said he yanked it while I was laughing. That was what was known as relativity. "What's in those packages?" I asked him, pointing to the long, thin parcels the porter had given him. "None of your business," he said. Jem said, "How's Rose Aylmer?" Rose Aylmer was Uncle Jack's cat. She was a beautiful yellow female Uncle Jack said was one of the few women he could stand permanently. He reached into his coat pocket and brought out some snapshots. We admired them. She's getting fat, I said. I should think so. She eats all the leftover fingers and ears from the hospital. Oh, that's a damn story, I said. I beg your pardon? Atticus said, don't pay any attention to her, Jack. She's trying you out. Cal says she's been cussing fluently for a week now. Uncle Jack raised his eyebrows and said nothing. I was proceeding on the dim theory, aside from the innate attractiveness of such words, that if Atticus discovered I had picked them up at school, he wouldn't make me go. But at supper that evening, when I asked him to pass the damn ham, please, Uncle Jack pointed at me. See me afterwards, young lady, he said. When supper was over, Uncle Jack went to the living room and sat down. He slapped his thighs for me to come sit on his lap. I liked to smell him. He was like a bottle of alcohol and something pleasantly sweet. He pushed back my bangs and looked at me. You're more like Atticus than your mother, he said. You're also growing out of your pants a little. I reckon they fit all right. You like words like damn and hell now, don't you? I said I reckon so. Well, I don't, said Uncle Jack. Not unless there's extreme provocation connected with them. I'll be here a week, and I don't want to hear any words like that while I'm here. Scout, you'll get in trouble if you go around saying things like that. You want to grow up to be a lady, don't you? I said, not particularly. Of course you do. Now let's get to the tree. We decorated the tree until bedtime, and that night I dreamed of the 2 long packages for Jem and me. Next morning, Jem and I dived for them. They were from Atticus, who had written Uncle Jack to get them for us, and they were what we had asked for. Don't point them in the house, said Atticus, when Jem aimed at a picture on the wall. You'll have to teach him to shoot, said Uncle Jack. That's your job, said Atticus. I merely bowed to the inevitable.
Hey, what's going on, Radley?
Exculpatory evidence.
Took Atticus's courtroom voice to drag us away from the tree. He declined to let us take our air rifles to the landing. I had already begun to think of shooting Francis, and said if we made one false move, he'd take them away from us for good. Finch's Landing consisted of 366 steps down a high bluff and ending in a jetty. Farther downstream, beyond the bluff, were traces of an old cotton landing, where Finch Negroes had loaded bales and produce, unloaded blocks of flour and sugar, farm equipment, and feminine apparel. A 2-rut road ran from the riverside and vanished among dark trees. At the end of the road was a 2-storied white house with porches circling it upstairs and downstairs. In his old age, our ancestor Simon Finch built it to please his nagging wife, but with the porches, all resemblance to ordinary houses of its era ended. The internal arrangements of the Finch house were indicative of Simon's guilelessness and the absolute trust with which he regarded his offspring. There were 6 bedrooms upstairs, 4 female children, 1 for welcome Finch, new staircase. On a bell on a pole, used to summon field hands or as a distress signal. A widow's walk was on the roof, but no widow's walk there. From it, Simon oversaw his overseer, watched the riverboats, and gazed into the lives of surrounding landholders. There went with the house the usual legend about the Yankees. One Finch female, recently engaged, donned her complete trousseau to save it from raiders in the neighborhood. She became stuck in the door to the daughter's staircase, but was doused with water and finally pushed through. When we arrived at the landing, Aunt Alexandra kissed Uncle Jack. Francis kissed Uncle Jack. Uncle Jimmy shook hands silently with Uncle Jack. Jem and I gave our presents to Francis, who gave us a present. Jem felt his age and gravitated to the adults, leaving me to entertain our cousin. Francis was 8 and slicked back his hair. "What did you get for Christmas?" I asked politely. "Just what I asked for," he said. Francis had requested a pair of knee pants, a red leather booksack, 5 shirts, and an untied bow tie. "That's nice," I lied. "Jem and me got air rifles, and Jem got a chemistry set. A toy one, I reckon. No, a real one. He's gonna make me some invisible ink, and I'm gonna write to Dill in it." Francis asked what was the use of that. "Well, can't you just see his face when he gets a letter from me with nothing in it? It'll drive him nuts." Talking to Francis gave me the sensation of settling slowly to the bottom of the ocean. He was the most boring child I ever met. As he lived in Mobile, he could not inform on me to school authorities, but he managed to tell everything he knew to Aunt Alexandra, who in turn unburdened herself to Atticus, who either forgot it or gave me hell, whichever struck his fancy. But the only time I ever heard Atticus speak sharply to anyone was when I once heard him say, "Sister, I do the best I can with them." It had something to do with my going around in overalls. Aunt Alexandra was fanatical on the subject of my attire. I could not possibly hope to be a lady if I wore breeches. When I said I could do nothing in a dress, she said I wasn't supposed to be doing things that required pants. Aunt Alexandra's vision of my deportment involved playing with small stoves, tea sets, and wearing the adder pearl necklace she gave me when I was born. Furthermore, I should be a ray of sunshine in my father's lonely life. I suggested that one could be a ray of sunshine in pants just as well, but Auntie said that one had to behave like a sunbeam, that I was born good but had grown progressively worse every year. She hurt my feelings and set my teeth permanently on edge. But when I asked Atticus about it, he said there were already enough sunbeams in the family, and to go on about my business, he didn't mind me much the way I was. At Christmas dinner, I sat at the little table in the dining room. Jem and Francis sat with the adults at the dining table. Auntie had continued to isolate me long after Jem and Francis graduated to the big table. I often wondered what she thought I'd do. Get up and throw something? I sometimes thought of asking her if she would let me sit at the big table with the rest of them just once. I would prove to her how civilized I could be. After all, I ate at home every day with no major mishaps. When I begged Atticus to use his influence, he said he had none. We were sat where she told us to sit. He also said Aunt Alexandra didn't understand girls much. She'd never had one. But her cooking made up for everything. 3 kinds of meat, summer vegetables from her pantry shelves, peach pickles, 2 kinds of cake and ambrosia constituted a modest Christmas dinner. Afterwards, the adults made for the living room and sat around in a dazed condition. Jem lay on the floor. "Grandma's a wonderful cook," said Francis. "She's going to teach me how. Boys don't cook." I giggled at the thought of Jem in a neighborhood. "Grandma says all men should learn to cook, that men ought to be careful with their wives and wait on them when they don't feel good," said my cousin. "Want Dill waiting on me," I said. "I'm Dill?" "Yeah, don't say anything about it yet, but we're going to get married as soon as we're big enough." He asked me last summer. Francis hooted. What's the matter with him? I asked. Ain't anything the matter with him. You mean that little runt Grandma says stays with Miss Rachel every summer? That's exactly who I mean. I know all about him, said Francis. About him. Grandma says he hasn't got a home. Has to, he lives in Meridian. He just gets passed around from relative to relative, and Miss Rachel keeps him every summer. Francis, that's not so. Francis grinned at me. You're mighty dumb sometimes, John Louise. Guess you don't know any better, though. What do you mean? If Uncle Atticus lets you run around with stray dogs, that's his own business, like Grandma says, so it ain't your fault. I guess it ain't your fault if Uncle Atticus is a nigger lover besides, but I'm here to tell you it certainly does mortify the rest of the family. Francis, what the hell do you mean? Just what I said. Grandma says it's bad enough he lets you all run wild, but now he's turned out a nigger lover. We'll never be able to walk the streets of Maycomb again. He's ruining the family, that's what he's doing. Francis rose and sprinted down the catwalk to the old kitchen. At a safe distance he called, He's nothing but a nigger lover. He is not, I roared. I don't know what you're talking about, but you better cut it out this red-hot minute. I leaped off the steps and ran down the catwalk. It was easy to collar Francis. I said, take it back quick. Francis jerked loose and sped into the old kitchen. Nigger lover, he yelled. When stalking one's prey, it is best to take one's time. Say nothing, and as sure as eggs, he will become curious and emerge. Francis appeared at the kitchen door. You still mad, Jean-Louise? He asked tentatively. Nothing to speak of, I said. Francis came out on the catwalk. You gonna take it back, Francis? But I was too quick on the draw. Francis shot back into the kitchen, so I retired to the steps. I could wait patiently. I had sat there perhaps 5 minutes when I heard Aunt Alexandra speak. Where's Francis? He's out yonder in the kitchen. He knows he's not supposed to play there. Francis came to the door and yelled, Grandma, she's got me in here and she won't let me out. What is all this, Jean-Louise? I looked up at Aunt Alexandra. I haven't got him in there, Auntie. I ain't holding him. Yes, she is, shouted Francis. She won't let me out. Have you all been fussing? Jean-Louise got mad at me, Grandma, called Francis. Francis, come out of there. Jean-Louise, if I hear another word out of you, I'll tell your father. Did I hear you say hell a while ago?